Hello, good evening to you. Welcome to Business Focus here on TV3. My name is Alfred Okansi, and tonight, the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, says the right foundation has been laid for jobs to be created in the ensuing year 2018. But the LPG Marketers Association say they will lose the jobs that they already have in 2018 if the cylinder recirculation program government has proposed is implemented in the manner in which it's been outlined to be done, all other things being equal. If you recall, the president instructed that this recirculation policy or program be instituted after that gas explosion at Atomic Junction, and then following the public outcry that indeed followed up after that particular gas explosion. Well, the LPG marketers are not too happy about it. They're threatening a court action against government. We'll be finding out exactly why they intend to do this. Also, we'll be testing the pulse of the city. It seems to be a bit stable in the midst of all the pressures that currency expert postulated. We'll be finding out how the strength and the stability of the currency will be going into the end of the year and the first quarter of next year. Also, the COPEC is alleging that there are some thieves and criminals at the Tamale refinery. We're finding out who are those tonight here on Business Focus. My name is Alfred Okansi. Let's find out the headlines in the world of business over the past 1 week. Okay, welcome back. Those were some headlines that dotted the business community. Remember, there's a lot more of business news on 3news.com, and look out for the business section, and we'll get into that. Already joining me in studio is the Executive Secretary of COPEC. That's Duncan Amoah. He is a regular, prominent voice when it comes to speaking for consumers of petroleum products in this country. Duncan, it's good to have you. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Thank you.
Also joining me in studio is Bernard Oredu. He is the Public Relations Officer of the LPG Marketers Association. So Oredu, good evening to you. Thank you.
Thank you for
joining us this evening. Now, you're threatening to drag government to the cleaners because of this decision or this directive by the president to have the cylinder recirculation program or project rolled out in 2018. I understand you just came out of a meeting. Let's start from there because it's exclusive to us.
Yes,
what
indeed
was discussed at the meeting of the LPG marketers about this particular issue?
Well, thank you. Last week, I think either Thursday or Friday thereabouts, we indicated our intention to come out with a press conference. And we were going to use that press conference to announce our next way forward in terms of our grievances or our concerns with the implementation of the new cylinder recirculation module. We were of the view that there were some issues, there were some challenges that needed to be addressed. And we were seeking audience with the minister to actually seek the best way to resolve these issues. But we were not being heard. So we had come last week to tell the general public that we are going to have a press conference on Tuesday and then announce to the public what we intend to do. But today, we went into another meeting, like you said. We have received a letter from the ministry, giving us...
The Ministry of Energy
the
has
Ministry of
written
Energy, yes. The letter was sent, I think, on Friday, giving us audience on Wednesday. So we've had that invitation from the ministry that, okay, if we say we have any grievances, we should come back to the table for a discussion. So as we speak tomorrow, the planned press conference won't come on. Our members have resolved that if the minister has decided to give us a listening ear, let's explore that avenue. So tomorrow, we won't go ahead with the planned press conference. We would wait first to meet with the minister on Wednesday and see the outcome. Then we come to the general public.
You've been asking for this listening ear for
almost
a very long
yes,
time.
Almost 2 months now. Yes, almost 2 months now. We have always maintained that we want to act with utmost good faith. It won't be as if probably we are acting or putting up those actions because of some material motive. We wanted a listening ear from the minister because we thought that there were very pertinent issues we needed to address.
So what were your disagreements and your problem with this recirculation?
You know, we've come a long way. Initially,
policy.
when this whole thing started, it was a no-no position for us. We thought that the current module should be improved upon and we should go ahead with the current module as concerns LPG delivery. But we realized that, okay, the government wants to roll out the policy. So initially, we had withdrawn from the implementation committee. We resolved to go back to the implementation committee because the minister had told us that all our problems, all our concerns were going to be addressed by this implementation committee, which had, we believe that the constitution of the committee could help us resolve some of the grievances and our concerns. So we were back at the implementation committee. Then we saw some issues and raised it that, we were directed by the ministry that should we come to the implementation committee, it will be the avenue for us to seek redress to these concerns. But then the chairperson of the committee again directed us back to the ministry, saying that they are only there to implement, and if we have anything concerning the policy, we should go back to the policy formulators. So we believe that, okay, if that is what we are, even though we thought it wasn't fair because we had been brought from the ministry to the implementation committee, we decided to go back to the ministry by writing numerous letters to the ministry that this is what happened at the implementation committee. Give us a listening ear to address this.
Yeah, so what were those issues?
Okay, we realized first and foremost, there wasn't any clear-cut rule for the current operators. The distribution chain, which was going to come with a cylinder recirculation module, had no place for us. I mean, as market people who had been in the industry for more than 30 years, we are of the view that it should have been ours of right to be migrated onto the new distribution chain. But there was nothing like that. It looked like we would have to go hustle with other people to come even into the distribution chain, which we thought it wasn't fair because we are the industry players. Then there were issues about brand names and all that because you would realize that the distribution channels had no avenue or platform for those of us who have had some brand names over the years to continue in that trade. So we thought, no, there are pertinent issues, we need to address them. Then the issue with timelines as to the time that this policy is supposed to be rolled out. We are of the view that even if the government intends to roll out the policy, it should be done alongside with our current operation module for the Ghanaian to actually decide that I would patronize this particular module. But to say that by the end of 2018, you're going to phase us out, we thought the timelines were not that good. And there were issues of pricing and all those things. So we thought that, these particular issues needed to be resolved. But we were directed back to the ministry. That is why we needed that listening ear. And for 2 months, we were knocking at the doors of the ministry. We were not being heard. So we decided to resolve to the actions we had intended to do.
To go to court?
Yes. No, we had not actually made it clear. We said we were going to resort to any legal means available to us, which included going to court, which included probably a sit-down strike, which included any other legal means. But then we got a letter. Even though it's late in the day, our members of the opinion that we should act with good faith. The ministry probably, after various consultations, have found wisdom in the letters we have written to them and have decided to call us back onto the negotiations table. Let us go to listen to our minister, whatever he tells us. Then we know that at least we availed ourselves for all the opportunities. We resorted to all the avenues to seek redress. Then Ghanaians will know that we did our best, because one, even though we were waiting for over 2 months to hear from the minister, we never had any information. Just Friday, when we had decided to come back to Ghanaians to tell them our story, on Tuesday we get a letter. But we say yes, it is even late in the day, but better late than never. So we'll go back to the minister, tell him our problems, and see the best way forward. That is why we have decided to hold on to.
So Mr. Moa, yes. the Deputy Minister, Mohamed Amin Adam, described them as not attempting to hold Ghanaians on ransom. Now, this is the development. They have their listening ear. Is it the case that, looking at the supreme interest of the nation, do we have this policy go as it is, or they actually have a case that they should be listened to, these LPG marketers?
Indeed, Parkwasi, I have done some extensive study of the proposed model, which is the recirculation program, and the current existing model, which is the retailing bit, that allows the Ghanaian to just go out to any of the LPG outlets and buy whatever their pockets can afford. If you recall earlier, I had suggested that the recirculation model for us is not pocket friendly, because you are obliged to buy as much as the cylinder capacity, the maximum quantity that the cylinder can hold. Meanwhile, the current model would allow you to buy 10 cedis if that is what your pocket can afford at a time. And so, based on some minimum comparison or study, we have been of the stronger view that you needn't kill over 600 outlets because there's been an explosion in 1 or 2 or 3. But you could look at what the real issues were that were leading to some of these explosions. Mind you, the product they handle is hazardous. And I am yet to be told any policy of government that would say that there's been domestic explosions. Because mind you, the smaller cylinder bottles also explode in domestic settings. Sure. And so because there's been 1, 2, 3 domestic explosions, if you go to Korle Bu, the Benz unit, you find victims of such explosions. We should necessarily wipe out every domestic user and maybe find a way to introduce pipelines, you know. So once there are challenges, we would expect that we would move comprehensively to address the challenges so that the current system, if we are getting 98% safety,
I think the Deputy Minister made mention of the introduction of pipelines. So some of the plans they have in the future to distribution of gas.
That for us would be a very long-term project. And so if it is even the gas pipelines to homes, I'm sure we could start with that whilst trying to strengthen the current system. This has been tried and tested. We've seen how
the LPG marketers having gas stations for people to
the outlets. And if you even study the LPG penetration, the national document for LPG penetration, the current system would allow for effective penetration, because if there are districts up north where penetration is quite low, one would expect that once you have smaller outlets, people can be able to just access them. But when you are doing recirculation plants, what it will mean is that you go to fill the bottles at the bigger plants and only distribute them or forward them to the homes. If my bottle runs out, right, what happens when I want to go and buy 5 cedis? Because some districts are really poor. And so recirculation would not work across the length and breadth of the country. We have suggested that it should be thinked with carefully. Because at the end of the day, if the same subculture that allows us not to take minute details seriously is carried onto the bigger plant or the recirculation plant, and there's one explosion. Imagine if the atomic smaller outlet could cause 7. If there's a bigger plant and there's one explosion, you could imagine what it would also mean. So you only be graduating the danger from one point to the other unless you take a holistic step to address the challenges surrounding the current system. And if you even intend to roll out a new model, allow the two to run side by side over a period, so that if in the end the new model you are introducing over a period proves to Ghanaians to be much safer, much more reliable, much healthier, much pocket friendly, I'm sure these ones would naturally gravitate towards that. But I mean, when you decide to bamboozle everything and push everyone and come in with a new policy whose demerits, merits we cannot vouch for, I'm quite sorry. It will be difficult to support that kind of initiative that says we should wipe the current LPGMCs.
So what I say is that in your view, you don't want government to be seen to be solving one problem and in the same manner creating another.
Exactly.
In the process of solving a problem.
Exactly. This would even create much bigger problems for all of us.
Which is?
If you introduce something completely new, you know, it's just like saying that the government of Ghana throughout the period, right? Successive governments have let us down, right? So let us wipe out the governing system altogether, you know, and introduce...
We change governments when we feel like they are not meeting
successive
our needs.
Governments, yes. So the government structure, it is a structure that
change
is being...
constant.
That is what I'm saying. The structure that is being tinkered with here, it is not a change. If I go to one outlet and it doesn't serve me, I have the right to change. But when you decide to play with the entire structure, introducing something new whose pros and cons you are not exactly sure of, right? Whose market dynamics, whose economics, right? Like I indicated. Today, if I'm in up north, I've gone to my farm back, I have 5 cedis and I want to use my LPG. I can walk to the nearest outlet and buy 5 cedis. But recirculation would mean that if it is 80 Ghana cedis for the bottle, I should be able to meet 80 Ghana cedis, or I don't use LPG at all.
Okay,
those are challenges that we would wish a proper impact assessment be conducted so that we don't rush into something only to realize these problems, and when we decide to backtrack, we've already destabilized and disorganized the entire system, and you and I would suffer if all these things are allowed to go without any caution at all to implementers or promoters of the new policy. So we would wish something more meaningful comes out of whatever dialogue they would have with the ministry. If in the end the ministry is adamant and will want to go ahead with recirculation, we can only forewarn that it would also come with its own challenges. It is not a foolproof system. It is not a system that is entirely, friendly to everything and everyone. If you decide to fill bottles and carry them across the city, Bakwesi, if one should drop, right, and explode, you'll be carrying atomics, all over the place. That clearly.
That's fair. You raise some legitimate concerns there, but then I must say that the committee is going to start sitting from already.
Yes, already.
Senor Jose, I remember speaking about this, indicated that the supreme consideration should be the national interest in all of these deliberations.
Yes,
would you want to rather see government use 2018, because this whole policy is by the end of 2018 we should phase out this whole process? Would you rather propose that as we are getting into 2018, that period will be used as the tinkering period of testing both policies and running them alongside each other until the end of 2018, we're able to observe, see all and make those considerations, so by 2019 we have a foolproof policy to implement?
You see, it is never the case that we are acting, or whatever our actions are, is affront to the national or the nation's interest. I mean, we are in this industry, and if there is anything to improve our operations, of course, we should avail ourselves for it. What we have said concerning this particular policy is that, you see, it is a new policy that you need to at least test pilot for some time. So we have proposed that even in the event that you would have to bring this policy, even though initially we were strongly opposed to it, choose an area, let's say the whole of Greater Accra, probably Tema or Accra, that, okay, this is what we intend to do. So for the next 1 year, if you want LPG, when you are in Greater Accra, you are going to resort to this particular module. Whereas the current module is allowed to run. We believe and appreciate that there are some shortfalls with our operation. That is why we are hoping that as operators, together with our regulators and the ministry, we should come together to see the best way to improve upon our activities in terms of the safety issues. So we have always maintained that, yes, if the safety standards with our operations are high, we don't see why we shouldn't be able to operate these modules together. Because one, at least we have been around for some time. Our module has been around for almost 30 years, but there is going to be a new model. Take a particular place, test pilot.
How many are you? What's your membership size? How many LPG marketers?
The marketers, we have about 42 marketers. 42 as we speak right now.
How many people do you employ nationwide?
It's close to 7,000.
7,000.
Yes, 7,000 people. So all we are saying is that don't bring a new policy by killing the old policy. Test pilot it, and even after the test pilot for probably a year, let the two run side by side. Because you see, like Duncan said, we have people, different categories and classes of people who patronize LPG. Let people even understand what this whole recirculation is all about. Because when we do the one-on-one education with people, that is going to be a system where you won't own your cylinder. So if, Alfred, you have cylinder B and you deplete your LPG within that particular cylinder, it comes to Duncan. It is not everybody who would want a cylinder change in the kitchen. So let us even educate the general public. Let them know what they are about facing. And let us know their concerns. Because you see, if I keep my cylinder probably in this particular atmosphere, it is not as if it is imperative on Duncan to keep it in the same atmosphere. So it means the issue of ownership of cylinder is even something that we really ought to educate the general public.
Well, President Akufo-Addo, thank you. He doesn't look like he's going to change his mind on this. So what's the way forward, Duncan? In just a minute. I mean,
we do not think that... Alfred, we do not really think that we should rush. Indeed, we would rush and only bite our fingers if we don't heed to some of the advices that independent bodies like ours would prefer. We would want to see a much better system where their operations are much safer, both for their investment, their employees, and the general public. Right. We are not quite sure that it is just one for all for one kind of thing. Let's clear them entirely. Let's bring a new model whose whatever we cannot tell for now. We would want to see if there's anything at all. Some 5-year piloting, like he suggested. Take it to Tema, pilot for 5 years, so that the people of Tema, if it works efficiently and effectively for, say, Tema or Kumasi or Cape Coast or Takoradi, I mean, you can replicate that across the country. But rushing it all and sundry across the country in one swoop, whilst killing 7,000 employees of the current system, we do not think that would go quite well.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Sorry, are we seeing any reduction in LPG?
Oh, not
for the Christmas period. You're not going to reduce it for us.
It's not something we should expect.
But it will be stable. No increases.
We believe so.
You believe so?
Yes.
We
can't vouch for any increment or reduction, but we hope that probably, of course, we are susceptible to market forces. True. And when these things come rushing in, there's no way we can stand them. We will only adapt.
At least tell our viewers that you are not going to increase LPG prices. At least that would be good.
But they should expect to be supplied LPG. As to the pricing, I can't vouch, but there'll be constant supply.
Bernard Radio speaks for the LPG Market Association. I'm going to go for this quick break. When I come back, Duncan Amoah is still with me because he is saying that there are some thieves and criminals at the Tema refinery. We're speaking about that. Do stay. All right, welcome back to Focus here on TV3. Duncan Amoah is with me. Is the Executive Secretary of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers, COPEC, and they've released a statement asking government to arrest and prosecute the criminals and thieves at the Tamale refinery immediately. Duncan, who are these thieves who are, you say, running tore down over the period?
Well, Alfred, indeed, we have come a long way as a country. Things that do not help all of us, it is high time we all speak against them. If you recall, there was a levy introduced to save toll from, mountain depths. That levy has been paid for the past 12, 13 years.
Absolutely. You're talking about the toll recovery debt levy.
Unfortunately, the more we pay, the more toll gets indebted. So one is asking, from 300 million today, we are above 800, 900 million. After 11, 12, 13 years of paying, we are still owing more.
And the debt keeps increasing.
It keeps increasing. So one is left wondering, why is the debt rather going up? Only to realize that indeed, some of the actions and inactions, right, activities in and around the refinery indefinitely would leave the refinery perpetually broke, and would also leave the refinery with mountain, debts every now and then. Why do we say this? Just 2 weeks ago, we got wind of an incident where some alleged or supposed scraps, right, had been packed into this articulator truck, the one that carries the cows, that long one,
right,
and taking out there to be sold. Proceeds of the sale, I'm told, have been pocketed. Management, unhappy with it, decides to set up a committee to probe,
the sale of those
the
scraps.
sale and the fraud that probably has been perpetuated on the refinery. And so, if you go through the committee, I would attempt to name some of the members that have been put together.
Who are those on the committee?
Pakwesi, it is indeed surprising.
This is Alfred.
Alfred, forgive me.
You know what?
Alfred, forgive me.
I'm sure we'll need to find out, because if probably get to know who instructed that sale and that element of fraud in that particular sale that you're talking about, and how much was made out of the sale.
Indeed.
These are questions.
Those are the legitimate issues we are raising. We want an external investigation conducted immediately. We do not believe that the practice which has been termed as normal is even normal, especially when you're talking of an ailing refinery who is unable to produce, is only sitting on huge, debts. The consumer is still paying for, only for people to pick whatever assets, be it scraps, be it equipment, be it pieces of a refinery, just to send out their sale and share the money. If that happens, per what we gather, some tube bundles or air cooler tube bundles, probably valued at around 400,000, which could have gone with the scraps, have been sold.
$400,000
USD, exactly. And that is just one equipment that we hear per our little nose, diving around, that has also gone out there. That's
with about 1.8 million Ghana cedis.
That is just one. And so we are saying that the figures could even be more. And it will be quite surprising that a refinery whose debts the trotro and taxi driver is still struggling to pay off today would allow those kinds of activities in and around it. When you push further, you are told there's a GM maintenance whose only response is to the extent that people came to bid for the scraps, and he only forwarded to management and it's been approved and he's gone to sell it. Indeed, if the refinery is a personal property, would you sell and pocket or share the money? As the refinery gets nothing. Whereas we also have found out that it is not only the scrap that has been sold, but again, some tools that were brought, some plates, right, that were brought for constructing a new tank.
Yeah.
So the plate tanks, the tank plates, they are still there rusting as of today. Things that have cost the taxpayer money. And so it looks as though the way and manner we are allowing the crooks to operate within the refinery, we would only continue to have the debts mounting and escalating, and in the end, the taxi and trotro driver yourself, Alfred, and Duncan, and everybody else would have to share to pay. That must not be allowed to
I've
continue.
been asking myself a question about why a 45,000 barrel per day capacity refinery should be going through these challenges. Are they really operational or man-made challenges? I mean, per what you know,
Alfred,
what's going on at the Tema refinery?
Per the little we found out from the refinery, most of them are man-made.
They are man-made challenges.
You would hear in recent past where there's no money, the moment money comes, some people would also call their so-called friends that the refinery is alleged to owe to tell them to come for their money, and if you come, you pay some money. All manner of things go on in the refinery. And so it is not surprising that almost a year after the fire in January, the refinery is unable to produce anything. And per our checks, it looks unlikely it would get back to production anytime soon.
Why?
Unfortunately, anytime you buy fuel, you are paying some pesos to TOR.
But TOR is not working.
TOR is not working.
But so do
people
the
are
workers
still
get
running
paid?
it down. They get paid.
Workers get paid.
They get paid.
When the refinery is not working.
They get paid. More and more debt is being added. Quite sadly. One of those instances happened 2 weeks ago where alleged scraps and some equipments have been bundled into a truck, sold off. Proceeds cannot be accounted for. The TOR management, through the Honorable Isaac Osei, I salute him, have instituted a probe. But we believe that there would have to be an external probe. TOR cannot investigate itself.
Absolutely.
We would need the external IOCO, we'd need the BNI, the CID, we would need every other investigative organ of the state to go in there to ascertain the exact magnitude, right, of what has been taken out. It could be 10 million Ghana cedis, it could be $10 million worth of equipment taken out there and sold, and the proceeds pocketed. A committee has been put in place by TOR, but we do not subscribe to that notion that TOR should investigate itself. So let IOCO and others go out there and also find out whatever they would find out. If at the end of the day, these actions, as we believe, were embarked upon with some fraud motive, these people should suffer the consequence thereof and should not be allowed to walk freely. Some of them are currently even threatening legal suits. But we dare them to go ahead. We dare them to go ahead because we have the pictures, we have the dates, we have the exact times that the so-called scraps were moved or ferried out of the refinery in the night. It tells you that people are really operating in the night. I could show you the pictures. In the night. It tells you that if it is a sale that is something quite usual and ordinary, why would you move those things in the night?
So the members of the committee of inquiry into these alleged sale of scraps from TOR and the sharing of the sales proceeds, I have names here: Mr. Prince Ofosueje, Chairman; Mrs. Emilia Abalabi, Member; Ms. Secure Hansen, Member Secretary; Mr. Bright Adongo, UNICOF Member; and Mr. Eric Nketia Nemakon, just a GTPCU. That's CWU rep and member. These are the names you have, or exactly. It's actually captured in your statement.
Exactly. These are the names of the internal committee set in place by TOR management.
But you want an external
investigation, external forensic investigation into this, so that if the magnitude is even greater than the 2 million cedis we are thinking, it could be established. If people would need to be punished, they should go ahead and arrest and sanction them immediately. If you allow them to get away with this, others would equally sell. The next moment you wake up, somebody has sold the entire CDU because somebody sold other pieces, nothing happened to them. We think that immediate action ought to be taken on these people and the culprits brought to book.
Duncan, thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm grateful, as always.
Duncan
Amoah is Executive Secretary of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers, COPEC. Joining us this evening on this. We're going to keep a very keen eye on this development at the Tema refinery and update you on a daily basis on this here on TV3. We'll be back shortly with some more here on Business Focus. To stay. All right, welcome back to Business Focus. Now, we're getting to some analysis of Ghana's production of oil in commercial quantity 10 years on. My colleague Ebenezer Jacob Boateng had an interview with Dr. Osei Asibe analyzing the 10-year period of our commercial production of oil.
Doc, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
First, what has been the effect of price volatility of the oil on our economy?
Well, obviously it has had some effect. We've seen that oil revenue prices, crude oil prices per barrel has been declining from at a high rate of about 120. It has declined to about $52 per barrel, and that clearly shows that your revenue projections will not be met. And so when we discovered oil, we were good enough to put together Petroleum Revenue Management Act, which actually has a benchmark revenue calculation that you have to do some moving average calculation to know how much your revenue is going to be. The PRMA also tried to put out certain petroleum fund, which we call the Stabilization Fund and then the Heritage Fund. And so where you have oil revenue shortfall, you can offset that by using some of the Stabilization Fund to make up. But the Heritage Fund is for the future generation, so that they can also have some benefits from the oil. But the drastic nature of the fall has virtually made it impossible for us to actually accumulate enough in the Stabilization Fund. So governments over the years have tended to sometimes even deplete the entire resource in the Stabilization Fund, and that has really not augured well with that. So when the oil prices fall, what that means is that you may not, the PRMA actually has designated certain key projects that you can spend money on. For example, on education, on agriculture, on infrastructure, and on capacity building. And so if you are not making enough revenue, what that means is that you will not be able to invest heavily in these key sectors. Although in terms of trade balance, that is, we increasing our exports, we have done quite well with the discovery of oil. Our trade balance has, closed, that the gap has closed significantly. And government has also tended to spread it very thinly across several sectors. And therefore, we haven't really had the impact. And mind you, oil exploration is very capital intensive. And therefore, it has very limited linkage with the rest of the economy. And so, although oil production has been ongoing, very few people actually work on the oil rig. And so it has not been that inclusive. And so the impact has not been that much felt.
Doc, there's this view that we are not getting much in terms of share from the oil. So why don't we take charge of our own oil, do our own production and sell?
Well, it is a legitimate concern that people have expressed, that we perhaps have to go back and renegotiate some of the contracts that have been signed, because it appears the contracts have been signed at the detriment of Ghanaians. Because if you look at a particular contract, we are not getting more than 40% from the profit that is generated from this oil. So we should go back and renegotiate some of this contract. I think it's a good idea that we do that, but at the same time, why did these people bring their money to invest in a very highly risky venture? Because the oil exploration sector is highly risky. When you can put in billions, but you may not discover oil at all. And so the risk involved is very high, and therefore everybody is cautious. So when you have an investor that is bringing that huge money and is lucky to find oil, you don't have to deprive that person of what is deserved. And therefore, I'm saying that much as it's important that we have to renegotiate some of this oil, we must also not send a wrong signal to potential investors, because the capital outlay that is needed in oil production is huge, that in many cases this country we don't have it, and we therefore have to rely on foreign direct investment to do that. The solution will be that if we are able to increase our saving rates, because there's huge financing gap that we are not able to meet. Like I said, oil production requires huge financial outlay.
Welcome back to Business Focus. Justice Edu is a research analyst at First Bank. He joins me today. As always, Justice, good to have you, a usual culprit of such a moment. But how would you assess the performance on the stock market from January to now?
From January to now, it's been very positive. If you look at the performance on the GSA as compared to other frontier African markets, you will realize that the Ghanaian market has outperformed the others by far. The closest to the Ghanaian market will be the Nigerian market. And it's easily understandable why the equity market has picked up this year. I mean, investors generally respond to the fundamentals of companies that are listed. Sure. And generally, you can see across the board that the fundamentals for most of the companies have improved. And the fundamentals is also linked to the general macroeconomic environment. This year, we've seen inflation being under control. And the erratic power situation we had for the better part of last year and even preceding years have been largely controlled. And the issues with banks, high NPLs, even though NPLs are still high, generally you can see a concerted effort among the banks to ensure asset quality is high and the issues we had last year are corrected. So across almost all the industries, you can tell that there has been improved fundamental conditions, and this has given investors the sort of confidence they need to invest in the stock market. One key thing also is that there's some form of inverse relationship between the equities market and the fixed income market. Around the same time, we've seen the equity market do well. The fixed income market hasn't performed too well because yields and coupon rates on freshly issued securities have been declining. So for fund managers and investors who are looking for alternative investment, something that will give you more than you get on your normal 182 days treasury bill rate or your 1 year or your 2 year note, they will switch to equities, especially at the time when general macroeconomic conditions are doing well. I
see. And this has actually reflected over the period.
Yes.
But let's look at the last quarter performance reflectively or retrospectively over the 7 or 8 month period within the last 3 as against what happened in the final quarter, which is ending now.
Okay, so you can tell that the acceleration we saw in the market from beginning of year to like June has been stronger than we've seen over the past couple of months. And it's because over the past couple of years, the banking stocks tend to drive the market. But what's happened this year is that you have stocks that are not in the, let's say, financial services sector that have done extremely well. Stocks like FanMilk, Gold, Total, they are not financial stocks, but they've done well. But over the past couple of months, these stocks have slowed in terms of the price appreciation on the market, and we can see that the financial stocks are picking up. But the key ones, you are looking at StanChart, GCB. StanChart for the past couple of months has been experiencing some form of sell pressure. So the price picked up to a point and it started declining. Among all the financial stocks, especially the large cap ones, the stock that appears to be increasing on a regular basis for the past 5 weeks has been GCB. But even though GCB is gaining, you realize that there are other stocks that tend to drive the market, and that's why you've seen some sort of even though the market is picking up, it's been doing so at a decreasing rate as compared to the beginning of the year.
I see. And what do you postulate? I mean, looking at this basis, postulate into the first quarter of next year, how the performance will be on the stock market?
Okay, so we expect the companies to release their fourth quarter results. We expect it to be largely positive. As I mentioned, the banks have corrected most of the wrongs of the past. The energy bond has been issued. We expect that to improve their financial results, and we expect investors to respond accordingly. Some food and beverage stocks have done well. GGBL, that's Guinness, is recovering. They recorded profits last year. This year they recorded losses last year, and this year they've returned to profitability, and you can see it's reflecting in their price and all that. So we expect performance to be positive going into the first quarter of 2018.
I see. And let's go on to the commodities market now, because according to the NPA, there's going to be any increase in petroleum prices because of what's happening on the world market.
Yes.
Now there's been just an insignificant reduction, if you could say. Is that trend going to continue, or you expect an increase again in the coming days?
I think a couple of weeks back, we were here discussing the decision by OPEC to continue with its production cut till the end of 2018. And I think as far back as that time, I mentioned that the crude oil that's being produced in the US and in Canada is continuing unabated. So production is increasing, even though the OPEC as a bloc, they are trying to restrict supply. The Americans, especially over the course of this year, that you've seen price increase slightly, are even more incentivized to produce more. And it's that supply pressure that's likely to curtail prices and possibly drive it down. So going forward into the future, or going forward into 2018, we expect that production to continue. I mean, there was a report that was issued sometime last week, and America is producing just about the same amount of oil traditional oil giants have been producing. And it doesn't look like they will relent on their efforts. And it's projected that about 1.1 million barrels of oil more will be produced, and that would lead to some form of supply glut on the market. And you know the dynamics of economics, when there's supply exceeding demand, clearly to have a downward effect on price. So that's what we project will happen going on into the future.
It's a good reason to be positive about the stock market. As always, Justice, thank you very much. He is an analyst with First Bank. Joining us as always. Remember, next week, let me just do this, that we're going to play one of the programs that we have with Times with the Captains, a replay of one of the earlier Time with the Captains. So there's going to be a new Time with the Captains this coming Monday, which is the 25th of December. There's going to be the Christmas replay of Time with the Captains. So stay with us. But this is the end of Business Focus. On behalf of the rest of the team, we're grateful. My name is Alfred Okanse. Stay with us to get into News 360. Good evening.